Uh-oh, bear with me. There we go. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the virtual chapter. Are we recording?
It does not look like it. It is being recorded. AI companion is being used, but it may be recorded by Alan.
So this would be great. I might actually want to edit the whole thing because we are recording as of a minute ago. I see the recording button on my screen, and I think it didn't have to tell you because it's let you all know a while ago that we were being recorded in some fashion or another. So, so now we are being recorded officially. So this will be a very interesting program for people that are just tuning in and catching their breath in order to in order to begin with us, because we are hypnotists and we are calm and we are collected. And it is July of 2024, and this is the virtual chapter. So we are so happy to have you all with us this evening. We've got a great guest speaker that we'll be introducing to you in just a little while. But we do like to start out with a couple announcements and some stuff like that there. So Karen, say hello to everybody, Karen, and tell them all about Hypno Thoughts if you'd like to.
Hello, everybody. And yes, Hypno Thoughts comes up next week, not this weekend, but next weekend in Vegas. What a good time. What a huge conference. And I hope I'll see some of you there. I'll be teaching this year a 2-hour workshop on accidental hypnosis, the number one reason people choose hypnosis on purpose. So discover with me how hypnosis happens in the wild. You know, when somebody developed their phobia against spiders, you weren't there, and probably neither was any other effective hypnotist, but there was something that installed that. So that's what we're going to be talking about and what we do to change that. That's Hypno Thoughts. What you got coming up, Michael?
Well, I would like to add to that spiders are, in fact, great hypnotists in and of themselves. Uh,
And
they
if you
can
take
they can change people's states almost as quickly as a mouse. So and a snake and a Doberman pincher. What else do you need? A list of great things that hypnotists work with. I think we all should keep them in our back room in order to test out our work at the end of the day. I have a bridge, for instance, that I'm going to.
alligators in your pool.
I got it from Timu, that online marketing for free. So anyway, I would like to also just mention the Galaxy of the Stars, which is coming up. We're still about 8 weeks away. Actually, we've got a little while to get to that, but it is in September on the 14th and 15th, and we have got a really great lineup this time, as we always have a really great lineup. But I do notice, and I've got to tell you, this is in the interest of political correctness, and there was certainly no intention behind it. But for the last two galaxies, all of our speakers have been men, which is outrageous when you consider the fact that I think these days about 75–80% of the hypnotists are in fact women. So this time we've got 4 women and 4 really special women. And the topic, as I'm calling it, the working topic is to boldly grow, because it's not only about adding tools to your toolbox in hypnosis, but it's also adding some, what do we want to say, some additional skills to help you build your practice and to continue to grow. So, for example, we're going to have Kate Bevan Marks. Some of you might know who she is, Dr. Kate. She's from the UK. She's all about education. In a good way. Yeah, I don't know if that didn't sound off-putting. In a really, really good way. And what we're really going to discuss with her, and she's gonna give us some ideas about, is how it is once you are certified, what can you continue to do and for how long, and what are some of the options for you to continue to grow and to continue to learn. Now we all know, of course, that there's lovely things like the virtual chapter, and there's some of the many programs that we do online, but there's a whole lot of ways that you can continue to develop yourself professionally throughout your career, and that's what she's going to talk about. We have got Jackie Young, who is on here tonight, talking about an application of parts therapy, a partnership in parts therapy. We've got Chandra Peterson, who is going to be doing a program on working with families and children. And then Sheila Granger is going to come along and talk to us about marketing in the 21st century, future-proof your business. And included, by the way, is some interesting stuff about how to use AI effectively. So it's going to be a great program, and I'm really looking forward to it. September 14 and 15. And there you go. That's all I have by way of announcements. And but we do have a little. You have any other announcements, Karen, before I?
No, Mid-America is coming up, but we've got plenty of time to talk about that. That's not till October. So
Good. Because all of these good people that are out here tonight, we warned them last month, I think. Do you remember? We actually did warn them that we were going to talk about what it is that hypnotists are doing in terms of are you using hypnosis in your own life, and how are you using it to take care of yourself, to support yourself, to make changes, et cetera, et cetera. Because every once in a while, it's like my mother's obstetrician never had a baby all all of those years, because he just didn't want to. Uh, but so why don't you start off, Karen? So how do you use hypnosis, and how do you use it for yourself?
my view of self-hypnosis is I'm doing it all the time, that everything I say to myself is a suggestion and I decide to take it or I decide to ignore it. I can ignore myself just like I can ignore anybody else. So I believe that I'm always practicing self-hypnosis. If I tell myself I can, I can. If I tell myself I can't, I can't.
Mm.
So the way I choose to use it for me is if I find myself going down a road that I don't like, or having emotional issues that I don't like, something like that, I want to step back from it, look at it, and say, okay, what is this doing for me?
Mhm.
Let's discover what it's doing for me. Let's think about it. Let's move in that direction. And then I can decide to move in a different direction if that behooves me.
Mhm.
So that's the way I like to do it. And that's why I like to teach my clients in how to use it all the time, to change this or to change that in the spur of the moment, in the real world, when you're actually out there. I taught myself using self-hypnosis how to stop flipping people off in traffic. Oh, sometimes I still choose to do so, but I taught myself to stop doing it just out of rage because it changed my perspective. Oh, they're not doing this to me. They are proving to me that I'm right in line with the universe and that my life is going really well. My reflexes are working perfectly. Life is good. And I do that now instead of getting raged out in traffic. That's a use of self-hypnosis, is it not?
It's wonderful. As a matter of fact, I used to really be upset with myself when I would like swear at people when I was driving. And then guess what? I went to a hypnotist, and now it doesn't bother me anymore.
No, another use of self-hypnosis.
Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So it's kind of nice because what you're talking about is sort of the non-trance, way of working with yourself. And one of the things I would suggest about that too is that there's another the swish pattern. Some people know the swish pattern in NLP, right? So here's a device, that you can develop to remind you at some given cue or another of the powerful self that you can be, and you can apply it all over the place. I used to just to have people just sort of think about they have a particular situation that they're working on, right? And to have some sense of the them that would not be that way, that didn't flip people off in public or swear at them in the car or whatever it is. And then, of course, you practice the switch pattern where you see a situation where that would be likely to happen. And I do it with distance. So you push that picture away and you bring in that picture of your ideal self. And you just take a moment to sort of breathe that in and get the feeling. Well, this is kind of the same. This is a wake version of giving yourself a suggestion, isn't it? And of course, in the switch pattern, you do it like several times. But I also think, and this is where it gets interesting to me, is that you can do something really generative with it, and that is to really start creating your best you. And there's so many different programs in the hypnosis community that have some version of that theme. Really start creating your best you, and then instead of just hooking it up to problems, what if you started doing exercises several times a day, the same way that somebody would do physical exercises or something else, where you started attaching it to all of the kind of mundane things in your life? Like, wouldn't it be interesting to suddenly sense how wonderful you are when you turn on the water faucet, or when you open the door, or when you pick up the telephone? And if you could create enough opportunities for that to happen, you really will start to change your self-concept, I think, in some dramatic ways. So again, there's a non-trance self-hypnosis. But I got to remind you guys, I got into hypnosis after I left the monastery. Chanting meditative, internalized experience is really a territory that I really like spending time in and has real power for me. So I really tend to be the trance kind of guy. Except I learned something about self-hypnosis because when I was doing it as meditation, it didn't have nearly so many rules. But once it became hypnosis, there was a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And one of the wrong ways, something that I'd like to talk about, is we tend to think that trance is about, and this is where the problem comes in, I think, we tend to think that trance is something that you do in order to connect with the unconscious mind. But see, here's the funny thing. The unconscious mind is listening the whole time, even before you begin the trance. The unconscious mind isn't the problem at all. That trance arguably is a way to get the conscious mind from interfering, to get the conscious mind out of the way. And for me, I think if you want to do something that's really generative, I kind of like the idea about not taking what I know as I sit down here and trying to apply it to what it is that I want, but to go to that place of openness and listening to sort of make available the possibility of discoveries and things that could surprise me rather than things that I had created with any conscious awareness. So this is for, and that's what I think happens in great meditation. In the forest of meditation, the Lord Sri Krishna plays his flute, I have heard. What an interesting idea to hear that lovely sound, surprising and delighting you along the way, and not knowing what to expect when you first go in. So it's one of the things I like about that. But the other thing I would say about it is just given this understanding of hypnosis that I think most of us have about the critical faculty and or neuromuscular lock, if you like my Gilligan model, different ways to talk about it. It seems to me that before you go into self-hypnosis, if you're using a trance, that's when you make your suggestions. If you want to be able to have that generative openness, that what you say to yourself is, I'm going to go into hypnosis now for 10 minutes. And while I'm there, I'd like my unconscious mind to do what it can do, to do the best that it knows how to do, to assist me with this concern that I have about confidence in public speaking. Something like that. But rather than what hypnotists often do is give you all the suggestions. Like for example, a weight loss hypnotist might tell you to chew your food 32 times and to set your fork down between bites and all of that. I don't want any suggestions. I simply want to introduce to the unconscious mind, here's the theme for the session, and I'm going to step back and I'm going to let you do some magic. And it'll be interesting to discover what happens out of that. And then drop into my hypnotic state. However I get there, there's any number of ways, right, to get there. And all of you have probably got 4 or 5, that you use. So anyway, there's my two cents worth.
Well, it might surprise you to learn that I actually do use the trance approach, Michael, with the Betty Erickson technique that you taught me actually years ago to sleep. It's a wonderful technique to sleep, and it's very trancy. Here's one thing I can see, or here's 3 things I can see, 3 things I can hear, 3 things I can feel, 2 of each, 1 of each is a way to really get into shutting down that conscious faculty, the critical faculty, and moving into a sleep state. And because of what you said, I think that I've given myself the suggestion to change my state and go into a sleep state. So I'll do this technique now. So I think I'm doing all of those things that you just described. And yes, even the hit it and get it gal does use trance states as self-hypnosis when it is the most effective approach.
By the way, as long as you mentioned Betty, I think it's interesting to point out that the lovely Mrs. Milton H. Erickson was doing her self-hypnosis technique back in the 70s and the 60s even. And nobody was talking about mindfulness yet. And if you think about it, here's a technique that says, here's something that I see, and here's something that I feel, and here's something that I hear, and then what else do I see or hear? And all of that, which is the epitome of mindfulness, which doesn't require a trance.
There you go.
But
Now
the,
we've gone full circle.
but the movement of conscious awareness, which basically allows the unconscious mind to work unfettered, if I might say. How cool is that? Well, what a lovely conversation, Karen.
I think we're all using it a lot more than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah. We've got just a couple minutes left here before we introduce our speaker. Does anybody have anything to add about what you guys do for self work, self help, or anything?
Carol.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm feeling a feeling that I don't like feeling, I ask myself, well, what did I rather feel instead? What do I want to feel instead? And it's very simple.
Yeah.
If I can't think of something I want to if I can't think of how to do that, then I think of a time where I was able to feel exactly that feeling that I want to have now. So
Yeah.
that works for me.
Yeah.
That's lovely. And this is really a common theme in neurolinguistic programming, of course, right? What state would you like to be in, or what would you like to feel instead of what you're feeling now? And the first place to go, as Carol wisely mentioned here, of course, the first place to go is to your own history. Is this already in me somewhere that I have, that I can reaccess and bring forward? And if it isn't in your history, the next place to go, by the way, is to find a model. What would it be like in this situation to be Tony Robbins, or what would it be like, or whatever, some of the Dalai Lama, that guy, he's always smiling. Have you noticed this? He knows some secret. So, and by the way, the Dalai Lama is one of those for me. Every once in a while, when I'm just absolutely quandered, I think, you know, what has this guy got going on in there? And I think it's actually just a decision, to be there. Uh, the nice thing that I've learned in hypnosis is you can be any way you want to be, as long as you're willing to know that that's true. See, one of the hard problems is some of us would really like to be stuck where we are, because then it can be somebody else's fault, and that really helps us be righteous, and all of that stuff. But even in the middle of some of the greatest tragedies, we all have the opportunity. Uh, Blissful thinking is just one thought away from where we are in the moment. You gotta figure out what the right thought, of course, is going to be to get you there, but there is one. So there we are. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have got a guest for you that I am so looking forward to introducing. And his name is Barry Downing. I keep wanting to call him Barry Dowling, and it's because of Father Dowling. Some of you might remember this old television program. But no, this is Barry Downing, like 10 Downing Street, so you all can remember it. Barry has, well, he's a friend of mine. I've been talking to him for a while now and really find him to be a wonderful fella. But he has worked with entrepreneurial and large corporate businesses. He has been on board of director positions in several of them. He has served as a vice president of operations for an international management consulting firm. He is an expert coach in leadership, in neurofeedback, and hypnotherapy, and RTT. So without further ado, Barry, we need to get you on the screen so that you can say hello, and then I'm going to chat with you. There he is.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Maybe I'll just add a little bit to the bio, just as background for everyone.
Sure.
I started my career as a naval officer, so I went through the Canadian version of Annapolis. I had a horrible experience. Early in my career, I was actually, over a period of 9 months, tortured a couple of times a week for about 9 months. I didn't realize how badly that had affected me until much later in life. But I couldn't sleep without having at least 1 foot outside blankets. because I was always the torture always happened at nights and whenever I was trying to sleep. So there are all of these things that are deep, deep, dark in the past. But it helped made me who I became. My last job in the military, I was a boot camp commander. So I was the mean, nasty man that was responsible for boot camp to basic officer training for all the Army, Navy, and Air Force in Canada. So I learned an awful lot about what works in leadership. I was recruited out of that to go and do company turnarounds. Did that really well. Went on to actually become the executive doing company turnarounds. Was the CEO of a multinational. And at the end of all of that, I said, you know what? What is the common denominator in all of these things that I've done over my career? And I basically told my wife, I'm not going to do anything for 2 years. I have to figure this out and figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I came back and said, you know what? I love helping people overcome their mindsets, overcoming their blocks, and achieving things that they didn't think they could to achieve. Right. I need more tools. So I said, do I go down and do a PhD in psychology? Yeah, it'll take me 8 years, and not sure I want to do that. And lo and behold, RTT with Marissa Peer, hypnotherapy popped up as it was happening the next week. So, okay, a friend of mine called me up, said, this is you, go do it. Didn't really know what it was that I was getting into, just that it seemed like the right thing to do. So off I went. Turned out I was pretty good at it. But surprisingly, so in this course were 60 students for a week in New York, 4 men, all the rest were women. And for whatever reason, that there was a lot of folks coming to me with horrific stories of abuse. So at the end of the week, I said, okay, just a question. Why are you coming to me? And the answer was, well, you're a man. Okay, thanks. I noticed that part. What is it? They said, well, you don't understand that sometimes from our position of being abused primarily as kids, you represent a safe man, and a safe man is not something that we're used to being around. So that intrigued me. I asked to learn a whole bunch more. I've been following up with a bunch of my colleagues from way back when, working through various things of abuse, even like what happened to myself and how I lived through it. And I decided that I didn't have enough tools to do everything that I need to do. So I had one case I'll discuss in a moment. Horrible. I can't even explain the depth of the horrors that this lady went through. Religious abuse. It was of the worst kind. But I didn't have enough school. I was able to help her so much with hypnotherapy. And I said, well, I need more tools. I read Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps Score. One of his recommended tools was neurofeedback. I said, okay, the case he was describing, or the cases that I was living through, said, I need to learn this. I need to learn what it's about. I learned it, did a good job at it, became quite good at neurofeedback. I was asked by my mentor, who was the clinical psychologist, you're good at this, you explain this well in a non-academic way. Would you help me train other people on how to use neurofeedback? Sure. Along the path, I said, that's a good tool. I need more tools as we're going through. I also learned, I'm also certified in heart math, and not understanding how that works with the body. All that is background saying, when I look at neurofeedback, I'm looking at a whole person and saying, this person in front of me has a whole bunch of things that work well. They have a body, they have a mind, they have a brain, and sometimes they're integrated and sometimes they're not. So if I look at a lot of the cases where early childhood abuse, a lot of those victims at that time would disassociate. So they kind of lost track of their body. They couldn't connect with what was happening in their body. And I needed a way to reconnect the body to actually go where we need to go. And neurofeedback happened to be quite good for that perspective. Sometimes if you have clients coming in and they are just extremely anxious, or ADD clients, ADHD clients, where they just can't focus at all, well, trying to take them through a hypnotherapy session sometimes it can be quite difficult if they're looking for the squirrel every 30 seconds. So there are tools as well where you can actually help bring that back into control. all of that is the background. And in terms of this presentation, it's not really a presentation. I'm hoping it's a dialogue. I'd like to start by asking, have any of you had clients where you kind of look out and say, I think the subconscious is playing hide and seek with me? Is that something that's happened to anybody else, or is that just to me? Yes, no?
Yeah, sure.
So hypnotherapy is fantastic, and I love it. I use it a lot, and Karen, I use it for myself as well, so I totally agree. And I typically flip back and forth between trance or no trance, depending what the situation is, and I love both. So I love the meditative part, but I also like just getting it done sometimes. But sometimes our clients need other tools. Sometimes you need to know where they're at and where they're coming at it, where they're coming into a session with you, and can you get them into a state where your hypnosis can be effective? Or sometimes you've gone through the hypnosis, they're still having issues. Are there other tools that you can bring to bear? Is anybody else here experiencing heart math, or is show hands?
Just a
None?
long
A
time
little
ago.
bit. So the principle in heart math is that the heart also has a brain. So there's actually 40,000 neurons in the heart, and they call it a little brain, and it is a little brain. And the heart actually sends more messages to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. So sometimes if you're in fight or flight mode, well, that's really your heart is sending message to the brain. We're in trouble. We need to get ready for a fight. There's a bunch of things going on. And your brain says, okay, we'll start pumping out the cortisol or whatever the other hormones that we need to get ready for this fight are going to be. Well, sometimes if you can just calm the messaging from the heart first, you're able to say, okay, we'll park that to a side and deal with it as we go forward. So heart math is simple as hypnotists or hypnotherapists. It's just Google it, go to YouTube, get a free session. It's not hard. It's really saying, put your hand on your heart, visualize breathing in and out of your heart. And the big key is find some memory, some recollection. So as a hypnotherapist is right up our alley of a time in your life where you had great compassion or something where you're really, really incredibly positive that something that happened in your life. Mm-hmm. And as you're breathing, you're visualizing that feeling in the breath going in and out of your heart. Typically, what you're trying to do is activate your parasympathetic. So if you're breathing slower than your exhale, than you're breathing inhale, you're going to be saying your brain's going, okay, I'm good. We can't be in a fight or flight mode because I'm breathing slower. It means we must be okay. So little simple tools like that are fantastic to get you into a state where you can actually use all of the tools that we have available.
So I just want to underscore note how similar that is, what you're just talking about there with what Carol was mentioning earlier as her sort of method of selecting a state from, is this something that I've had or that I've experienced somewhere in order to bring it forward? And then, of course, you're adding a little more to that in the way that you're describing it. But I just want to stop you for a minute because first of all, you're really flying through this. We're just a few minutes in, so we got plenty of time. And I think for some of us who were just in first grade not so very long ago, it would help me to follow you if you could give us some sort of a definition of this is what is neurofeedback, and maybe just at the same time, because what we've probably all heard about is biofeedback. So if you can give us some idea about how these two things are related to one another, I think that would help me follow you a little more.
Sure. Neurofeedback is a form of biofeedback, so we'll start there. All we're doing is this is not stimulating the brain. This is only listening to what the brain is saying. The brain gives off electrical signals, and with proper equipment, we can detect what those signals are. And sometimes there are patterns that are really helpful, and sometimes there are patterns that are not so helpful. So we're just listening to what are the patterns that are going on in your brain and saying, okay, is this representative of potentially, there's different biomarkers of patterns that help you and bio patterns that are not so helpful. And we all have things where we're all different. We're all humans that have things that are happening in a different way. Maybe I'll go back to just like basic brainwaves 101. The neurofeedback is really, if we look at hypnotherapy working, it's a gross simplification. If we say hypnotherapy is working with the mind, neurofeedback is working with the brain. So the neurofeedback is working with we're trying to get the car tuned. The mind is going to race and is the driver of the car, where neurofeedback is the car. We're trying to get the car in position to be, and it's, the pistons are going to be tuned properly. We have the brake pedal and the gas pedals in the right places. So if they're not in the right places, this is where the biology is interfering with what's going on. So that can show up in various ways. So the brain waves generally can be divided into two categories: slow ones and fast ones. Slow waves are great when you're trying to sleep or rest or repair or recover from whatever some strenuous activity you've done. Well, that's the time when your eyes are closed, your brain goes, this is time to be doing the rest and repairing. I should be safe. I should be okay. Now I need to do all that, take out the trash and do whatever I need to do with the brain. When your eyes are open, the brain says, okay, time to get stuff done. Those are fast waves. And there's a low beta, a mid beta, and high beta, which is just various, call it low gear, in gear, and high gear. Well, those are fast waves that are happening. Now, they all have a purpose, and they get played out in terms of whatever it is that we're trying to do, or we are doing, or we're trying to do. Sometimes the brain patterns are incompatible with what we're actually trying to do. Example, the high beta waves, it is also very representative of, quite often, alarm. You're in alarm mode. Now, high beta waves, if you're a trauma surgeon or you're a sniper in the military, in a combat zone, it's good to be on alarm all the time. But if you're not in those roles, maybe the high alarm going off all the time is not so helpful. Well, many of us if we've been through trauma or whatever else, our high beta setting is a little bit too high. So we're on alarm a lot, and sometimes all the time. So it's hard to rest and relax and do repair work if you're always on alert for somebody's going to shoot me or somebody's going to kill me. So that's a broad categorization of the two groups of waves, and there's different functions for all of those. In neurofeedback, we learn the biomarkers in different parts of the brain, what ratios are really useful, what ratios are not really useful. And again, all we're trying to do is give you, the client, the option to say, oh, my alarm is going off all the time, even when my eyes are closed. That's probably not so helpful for me. Maybe there's something we can do about that. And all neurofeedback it's operant conditioning, where basically I set, as the practitioner, I will be setting a protocol and saying, when you do this brainwave, you get a little reward. When you do this little reward, brainwave, you don't get a reward. And our brain likes rewards. And the rewards are really simple. It's an auditory sound or a visual cue saying the screen got brighter, the music got louder, things that I like. And if my brain wanders off and does things that shouldn't be doing when I'm trying to do that training, well, then the screen goes dark and the music fades away and I don't understand. My brain goes, damn it, I want that bunny rabbit back on the screen. How do I get there? So it's really about, it's like a brain gym where we're training our brain to exercise the various muscles, call them brain waves, that are appropriate for the scenarios that we're trying to do.
You're fascinating me with a thought, and I don't want to take you away too far with it, but it occurs to me when you said about the music got louder or the color got brighter or something, and I thought, oh my God, some modalities are impacting brain waves, and I've never even put those two thoughts together, and I've never put those two thoughts together in my. It's an interesting idea. Cool.
Before I carry on any further, does anybody have questions, like something burning that you want to know, or if I've completely blown by in the PhD level, or yes, Carol?
You kept saying measurement. That implies equipment. So you need equipment to do this neurofeedback stuff. Okay,
Yes,
I see a pair of glasses, looks like.
it's a
Oh.
Muse headband.
Uh-huh.
I've got an extra little electrode that I can use for various measurements in different places. So this is one. There's $100,000 pieces of equipment, and there's $259 pieces of equipment like this one.
I saw that expensive equipment being used in Phoenix a couple of years ago when I was there.
Mhm.
So it's nice to know there's simpler stuff available.
There's these nice, fancy, fashionable caps we can wear that do multiple electrodes and multiple readings at once.
And where does the readout go?
It goes, most of my equipment that I use here, I use remotely, so it's usually into an app. You can use it, either plug it into your computer or into an application. And most of the tools today are Bluetooth, so you can get them right onto an application that the various providers will give you.
Okay, thank you.
You know, here's another example. This is a Calibri, an ear clip, a little electrode inside that I place with a magnet, depending on which location I'm actually want to be doing. So, you know, this, you don't look so geeky when you're trying to do neurofeedback. You don't look like you're a refugee from the cuckoo's nest.
I wish it said Cubs on the front.
That would probably be a better hat. So the equipment is not that expensive unless you're trying to diagnose clinically. And I'm not a clinician, like I'm not a medical practitioner, so I can't diagnose. You know, if you want to go down with epilepsy or, you know, severe medical issues, brain damage, well, that's not what I do. That's not the patterns that I have. And honestly, the equipment that I have for our purposes is very good. So we don't need a lot of the research. The academic research will be using the Muse headband because it is so easy and it's not expensive to attain. So you can actually do a lot of training with it. So it's
Another question then. If
Yeah.
someone is coming in and you want to use the headband, it's important to know whether or not they've had a brain injury. Have they been in a coma, you know, or
Yeah. Yep.
are they experiencing dementia or? Okay.
Absolutely. Well, and a lot of those things, you know, there's a lot of things, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, you can see certain distinct brain patterns in the biomarkers. So although I can't diagnose, I can recognize things when I'm seeing them as well. The beauty here is that there's a lot of things you can actually help. You may not be able to, quote unquote, cure people, but you can help them with neuroplasticity to reroute some of their neural patterns to help them function better. You know, Parkinson's is a good example where neurofeedback is being used to actually help Parkinson's patients delay symptoms for up to 10 years. So you're able to, you know, Parkinson's, you're losing bits and parts of your brain along the way. Well, this is actually a way to help not stop it, but slow it, and, you know, give relief for a lot of the symptoms.
I was in a coma in 1985. And when I came out of the coma, all of a sudden I had dyslexia and attention deficit disorder. So do people with attention deficit disorder have a problem with your system?
It's actually one of the things that is neurofeedback has been proven to be best with is ADHD.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I'll give you an example. In gross simplification, if I look at the brain as a machine, the back of the brain is really the autopilot. So it's connecting to the brainstem, it's connecting to the bodily functions. So keep the heart beating, keep the lungs pounding, keep all the bodily functions running. If anything happens or is perceived to happen to threaten any of that, that takes priority. Brainwaves spring into action saying, nope, we're going to die if we don't fix this stuff because this is life-threatening. So, but sometimes we get brain signals that are saying there's a threat, there's a threat, there's a threat, and really there isn't a threat. So
well, actually, that's what happened to me because I had viral encephalitis. My brain started swelling up, and the system said, we can't deal with this. We're shutting everything down except this.
That's exactly right. So the back of the brain is the autopilot, or just keep everything running. Of course, that's all subconscious. The middle of the brain is more the bodyguard, where it's saying, okay, is there anything out there that could kill me? So how do I, the first thing is to avoid any threats. And it'll go through 5 sort of levels of threats. First one is the somatic threat. Is there something going on here that's going to make my body do something bad? Well, then the body's automatic or subconscious reaction is make the body do something in response. So the first response to a threat to the bodyguard is do something, move. So ADHD often is an example of where your body's saying, I'm trying to focus. I think that's going to hurt if I focus. So let's not focus. Let's squirrel. Let's twitch. Let's do something different. So in the brain waves, that actually frequently looks like the theta wave is like a break. It's theta, but we often hear about theta as in hypnotherapy. And I don't agree that it's only theta state for hypnosis. A lot of people say that, but I don't agree with that. I think you can be in hypnosis in a lot of different states. But for the sake of argument, theta is that dreamy state where you're very suggestible, or you're about to fall asleep. Well, that's okay if you're trying to sleep, if you're trying to be creative. It's not so good when you're trying to be focused and get things done. So in that case, the theta brainwave is starting to act like a brake, saying, nope, don't go over there because thinking too hard on that could be dangerous. It could be bad for us. So I'm going to throw the theta waves in there and put it on a brake. So a typical pattern for an ADHD brain would be your theta goes up too high and your beta is too low. So your ability to get the car into gear is too low and your brake is on all the time. So when you really step on the gas and you're trying to go and you're stepping on the brake, well, anybody that's driven a car and tried to do both of those things knows you get a lot of squealing tires. And if you do that for too long, you actually burn something out. So that's kind of what happens in a lot of the ADHD brains, is that you're trying to have both brain waves go on at the same time. Now, we can say, let's use hypnosis to help with all that. It's really hard sometimes in those sort of cases to say, well, let's just get into that state, because the tendency might be going into increasing the theta, which is the exact opposite of what we would like to have in this particular case. This case, we say, no, let's get us into low gear. Let's get us into low beta so we can be moving, and let's take the foot off of the brake. Let's take the foot off of the theta so we're not braking as we try to get into gear. So, that's an example of where, if I may, I'll just jump right into a case. I've got a preteen girl. Mom says, I've been to psychologists. I've been to everybody in the network that I know of. I'm pretty sure she has ADHD, but nobody's diagnosing her with it. So I can't diagnose her. That's not part of my mandate. But I can look at, if she's having difficulty with focus, I can look and try to help with that. She says she's also having issues with anxiety. And she just went through a whole litany of issues that this kid was having. So, well, it seems like there's more than one thing you need to address. Why don't we address the attention in school? Because that's the one that's getting into all the trouble right now as a first place. So, okay. So in this particular case, that's exactly, I did my assessment. I looked and I saw that her theta beta ratio in the middle of the head, so the theta being in the numerator, beta being in the denominator, was 3.25. Classically, when we looked at from a biomarker perspective, it used to be prior to COVID more discrete. Since COVID, particularly with kids, it's actually changed a lot. So that's something else to talk about. But 2.7 is the warning, big red light. Yes, there's probably likely ADHD. And this young girl was like way, way, way over that. So I said to her mom, okay, let's stop. I said, let me describe what I think she is probably common. Don't tell me the symptoms. Let me describe it. So I said, this is probably happening. This is probably happening. She goes, are you recording her? That's exactly what's happening. I said, so I explained again. It's like every time she's trying to step on the gas, her brain is putting on the brake. And as a result, she has to do something different or the brain just hurts. Literally, the brain hurts when that's going on. Okay, we started doing neurofeedback. A month later, she said, hey, I'm not a space cadet in class anymore. I can actually listen to my teacher. And her mom said, "Do you think maybe now we can try hypnosis for anxiety?" I said, "Now's the perfect time to go into hypnosis for the anxiety." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" She says, "Well, she's afraid of vomiting. She saw somebody in class that vomit, and now she's always just afraid of vomiting. It's their big thing of vomiting." I said, "Something doesn't sound like that's what's really going on to me, but tell me more." And she says, "Well, she went into class. She was, a classmate vomited all over everybody, and now she's petrified that if she's left alone at school, she's going to vomit." Okay. Through a number of hypnosis sessions, we actually went through, and she had COVID a few years earlier. She had recovered from COVID. One day at school, prior to the famous incident with the vomiting, the same friend said, "I can't drink out of your water bottle because you had COVID and I might catch COVID and that could make me sick." Guess what happened 10 minutes later? She vomited. So this poor little girl went, "Oh my God, it's my COVID. I made her sick. I'm going to kill everybody. So this whole thought that it was, she was afraid of vomiting. It wasn't vomiting. It was all back to the fear of dying from COVID and the uncertainty of what was happening. Her mom confirmed, yeah, for a while she was isolated at home. Her sister and mom and dad were in a different part, and she was isolated for a whole week, and that was just horrible for her with all of that. But had we not gone through the neurofeedback to get her to be able to focus and be calm enough in school, I would have had a great difficulty in this particular case actually going to the hypnosis. But seeing she was calm, we then went to hypnosis. And just to make the trifecta, yesterday we started with heart math. Her mom said, she saw the psychologist. The psychologist was giving her, essentially was the self-hypnosis technique. She didn't call it self-hypnosis, but it was the same. Said, I know what that is. I know exactly what that is. But she didn't actually do a very good job explaining what it was about, how to do it. So I said, okay, let's find something a little bit easier, which is just heart math. Let's just find a good intention that we had done in some good intentions in the hypnosis, saying, okay, your mom is a strength for you. Let's be able to, bring your mom's energy into whenever you need, even if she's not there with you. So that was part of the strategy with the hypnosis. So I said, okay, imagine that feeling that your mom is there protecting you in all of these cases. And I want you to breathe through your heart. She's very, very, her artistic ability is off the charts in terms of her ability to imagine and to visualize. So she was seeing it. She says, "Oh, I see it. It's coming out of my heart, going into my heart." I said, "Great." Now, when you're starting to feel that little tweaky starting to come up, the nervousness, just want you to breathe for 3 minutes. So it's now been 3 days. And mom says it's like night and day. She's able to do something quickly. Now, in somebody else, like an adult, I would have probably preferred self-hypnosis. But with her, she's been like literally 3 years now of this major freak out all the time, having something different that was easy to do was another great tool for her.
Right.
So this is an example where you can apply multiple modalities to help your clients as you're going forward.
So I need to ask you a first grade question again.
Yeah.
Because you said in the middle of that story, you said something very interesting. You said, and then we started doing the neurofeedback. So and forgive me for this, but I need you to unpack that verb just a little bit. So when you're doing neurofeedback, so I understand that there's brainwave readings going on.
Yep.
But what are you actually doing with your client while that's taking place? What does a session look like?
Unfortunately, I can't do one live because I have to do it on myself and show you the screen at the same time, and that wouldn't work. For the client, the client, it could be listening. It could actually be watching a Netflix movie. Or typically when I start neurofeedback, I don't do that because it gets too distracting. For the kids, I have games, and some of the adults as well, where it's like playing video games with your brain. So a lot of kids like that. The boys typically get tired of it after about 5 sessions. The girls will hang out maybe 15 or 20 with the same game. It's just part of the practice that we seem to have. And basically, when I will set, for example, in this girl, I said, okay, your theta is up too high in the middle of the brain, and the low beta is not high enough. So we are going to do 18 minutes a day, 6 rounds of 3 minutes. where you're just going to sit there, put the headband on, and when your brain randomly does the right thing, it's going to get a reward at the beginning. So I set the reward threshold really, really high. So by accident, the brain does the right thing, gets a reward. But it's like a millisecond after the brainwave happens. So the brain goes, oh, I like that. What was it? And why did that? And how do I do that again? Over time, I'm lowering that threshold so it's 50-50. Basically, it's random. So you no longer need a device to be doing it. You've gone to the gym and your brain knows how to do it itself. So the session is really, in this case, 6 rounds of 3 minutes where she puts a headband on and she's looking at a tablet or an iPhone or an Android phone with a screen on it that either is like a video game or it's a Netflix screen, YouTube, or obviously if I'm trying to do something to calm her down, well, I don't have a first-person shooter game. That's going to be the wrong activity for that. If I'm trying to increase her low beta, so get her into gear, I want something that's not overly stimulating, but is motivating, is action orientated as she's going through it. So I select the right protocol. We go through, she does the training. I can watch it remotely as she's doing it. Not like I'll just see the readout on the screen. I won't actually see her doing the training. And I get to monitor, are her brain waves trending in the right directions? As they trend and stay in those zones longer and harder, then I change the reward rate so that her brain is doing it more and more on its own. So again, I'm not stimulating her brain. I'm just giving her the feedback to her brain. Every time you've increased your low beta, your little alien runs faster than the other little alien on the screen. And you like that. When your theta is going down, and when we want it to go down, then your little alien's going to run faster than the other little alien on the screen, which is fantastic. So it's that simple. The kids actually adapt really well. The people who I have the roughest time with are the PhDs. The people who want to know, well, I want the hack. I have to understand the science. I said, okay, let me give you the analogy. You tell me you want to learn how to ride a bike. If it's a kid, I'm going to put the kid in the bike and the kid's going to wobble a little bit, and over a while, they're going to get the balance, and pretty soon they're riding the bike. Well, the professor is going to say, no, I want to know the metallurgy. I want to know the gear to pedal ratio. I want to know the aerodynamics. Like, honestly, the only way you can actually ride the bike is ride the bike. So it's the same with neurofeedback. Just let the brain do what it's going to do. It's naturally able to do this, and it's not complicated to do.
Wow. Barry, somewhere around 1982, I would guess, 82, 83, something like that, Robert Dilts, the NLP guy, and Timothy Leary, the LSD guru, of course, both of them 3-letter acronyms nonetheless. They got together and they were working on a computer program called Icarus. And the deal with Icarus was, as you watched Icarus flying across the screen, you could control Icarus with your mind. There was GSRs or something, so that Icarus would either fly too close to the sun and his wings would melt, or you could keep him at a safe distance. So they were doing some brain training, if you will, with that. When does neurofeedback sort of come into its own as a field? Is it older than that, or is it about that time?
It was NASA trying to study the impact of jet fuel on astronauts. Barry Stearman in California was working in his lab, worked with a lot of cats. Unfortunately, a lot of cats did die in this exercise, but they died for science. They discovered that the cats that were actually exposed to the jet fuel and with certain sounds were able to later in non-related events react differently. They said, what's up with that? So they discovered what would be termed the alpha waves. So mindfulness training was the cats basically being in a poise mode. So the cats that were just calm, ready to act, but not freaking out were the ones that survived. And the ones who were not doing that didn't survive. So they said, well, there's something to this stuff. So Barry Stearman went from there into, again, this was, equipment that required a whole floor of a university to do. In the last less than 10 years, so maybe 7 years, we've now have all these remote devices that we didn't have. So neurofeedback has gone mainstream only in the last 7 years in terms of being able to do that. So right now there's still the bit of the Wild West where you have people that want to slap a headband on and just do whatever. If you stick to the protocols that whatever provider is giving you, that's fine, because you're not really typically doing any damage to anybody. You're not stimulating the brain. You may not be helping them as much as you should be, but you're not really typically doing a lot of harm to them. Worst case, some cases you might be giving headaches or other, your brain's just saying like, yeah, I'm not happy with what we're doing right now. But typically, it's very, very minor cases where you actually have any damage.
So let me see if I'm getting this, because this is really I'm learning something very different from what I had thought about when I first came in here. So you also know John Grinder, of course, you're aware. John Grinder, the NLP guy. When John and Richard Bandler both started going in their own directions, John wanted to codify the work that he was doing and what was behind it. And he had a different agenda than Bandler did. And Bandler's agenda was therapeutic in the way that we usually think about that, particularly in a remedial sense. It's about let's help people fix the various problems that they have in their life. And John's was about activating a natural excellence so that what then could follow would be something that arose out of that. And so John called it the new codes of NLP. And it sounds really similar to, I mean, not in terms of the way that it's done, but in its intention, really similar to the idea that you're using neurofeedback with people until to help them achieve some sort of optimal functioning level. And beyond that, then you can do more individualized specific therapy with a greater likelihood of success because they're coming from a more resourceful or more efficient place.
Absolutely correct. I'm right now. I'm working with some professional athletes where I'm doing all those three modalities with them. So in some cases, they may be not have a quote unquote therapeutic problem in their brain per se, but they're not at the ultimate peak performance that they'd like to be. So some cases, folks like that, it's the ability to shift states. So if you think, for example, I'm Canadian, so I'll talk about ice hockey. A goaltender sitting at his end of the rink, when the action's all at the other end, he doesn't need to be geared up, ready to respond on a milliseconds notice. He needs to be able to downregulate and say, okay, save my energy, concentrate, analyze the play, what's going on. But as soon as those guys are anywhere near his net, he's got to be totally on guard with all of his bells and whistles going off, prepared to react on a millisecond notice. That ability to switch back and forth is a critical element for example, a goaltender. Now, every sport, every position has its different things that are required, but that ability to be, you say in the zone, well, that's your brain state has to be in that perfect balance where things need to be as well. What's funny and I'm ex-military, so there's a lot of folks who've been doing mindfulness training for military, like some of our elite, well, particularly your U.S. military. And so I asked the question, I said, you're training mindfulness. Are you doing any pre-screening? What do you mean? Well, are you doing an EEG or taking a scan, everything? No. So do you not think that might be a little bit problematic? I said, why? Mindfulness is good. They said, well, if I define mindfulness as having a lot of alpha brain waves particularly from the mid to the front of the brain, that calm, relaxed, meditative state, that's kind of good, right? Yep. Said, do you know what depression can look like? Really high alpha waves in the middle and the front of the brain. So if you haven't made a determination whether that person is depressed and you start giving them extra depression, what might happen? Oh, crap. Said, have you had any issues? Yeah, we have about 10% of the population that are dropping out of the training or having issues with this. You might want to go back and have a look at them because it might be mindfulness may not have been the optimal solution for what they were presenting with. So this is a case where sometimes a tool like neurofeedback, where you can have an objective measurement, and even if you're not doing the full neurofeedback, you can just do an assessment and have a look at, what does the brain look like? This is a brain. So the nose is up on the top. this is a case where this was the alpha waves. So in these alpha waves, the colors on the bottom are standard deviations. So if it's dark, dark, dark brown, that's like 97.5 percentile above the age group for that population. If it's really, really blue at the other end, it's 97% percentile below. So this person on his alpha brain waves was off the charts, way above in all the areas that could say, uh-oh, this might be somebody who's going through depression, or this person is really, really, really chill. Now, this person you've met, because it's me. And this, when I was showing this to my advisor, he goes, "Oh my God, are you going through depression?" I said, "No, I'm actually pretty good." He said, "I've never seen somebody who can have that high alpha." He said, you must have some sort of practices that you do." So, well, one, I'm very spiritual, not necessarily in the religious sense, but I'm very spiritual, and I do go internal a lot with myself. He goes, "Yeah, you're probably in Zen Buddhist type zone with what you're doing there." So sometimes being able to have an assessment where you go, let me see what your brain looks like, and is it flagging things that maybe your client's not telling you? So this is an example over here. This is high beta. This person's alarm is going off all the time. That's just screaming anxiety. So sometimes just having a print, this assessment, it takes like 23 minutes.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. The diagram that you just showed me reminded me of mood rings. and noticeably that it seemed like the good end of it was the green ones.
Green in this case is in the middle. It's just your average. So in some cases, average is good. If you're looking for a peak performance, you want to be at one of those extremes, depending what it is that you're trying to train. Are you trying to upregulate or downregulate one of the zones?
Paul Brucker has had his hand up for a little while. Let's
okay. Thank you. I'm just wondering. I'm mine. The body keeps a score, etc. But people like athletes that get damaged, and physical injury, how does that fit into what you're doing?
It depends what the damage, like if it's concussions, typically a lot of that's going to be happening at a very low frequency bandwidth. So there's a different technology. It's EEGs, but much lower than what I do. So that would be more clinical based, where you can actually be getting in and looking at, are there ways to reroute some of the neuroplasticity to help deal with the damage that's occurred. But from an assessment perspective, I can certainly see where there's maybe patterns are a little bit more dysfunctional with I've dealt with some football players who have had some, lots of concussions. And said, he said, "Well, I didn't really know I had concussions, but I kind of suspected I did." And I said, "Well, are these your symptoms?" And he goes, "Yeah, those are my symptoms." So, "Well, your brain's kind of saying the same thing." I said, "I'm not a neurologist. I can't treat that. But if you want to work on whether it's, being able to downregulate the anxiety, or if you're trying to increase your calmness or whatever else, those are things that we can help with."
I'm thinking about other kinds of pain, not concussions, but other parts of the body that got really fucked up, in the course of, athletic event, whatever, and they have to deal with that physically.
Yeah, if it's emotional things, then that absolutely. But no, hypnosis is good for that too. It depends on what it is that you're trying to. What was the event that actually happened? From a neurofeedback perspective, my first line is saying, what is the most urgent crying symptoms that we're trying to deal with? If it's something that's painful or something that's stopping you from performing in whatever capacity, then obviously that becomes a high priority. The number one thing that generally comes up with neurofeedback, believe it or not, is sleep. If you can actually help people sleep better, a lot of these other symptoms typically happen to get much, much better. So slow waves typically propagate from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. So guess what? You need a lot of slow waves in the back of the brain if you're trying to sleep. If you're always in alarm mode, then your brain's not getting the sleep that it needs, and it's going to say, "Hey, I need sleep. I need sleep. I'm going to worry about getting sleep. I'm not sleeping because I'm worried about not getting sleep." And it's one of those endless cycles. So obviously, we can help with hypnotherapy, but we can also help from a neurofeedback. If you do an assessment, you say, "Yeah, your beta is off the charts in the back of the brain. I'm not surprised you're not sleeping. You've got all very little delta or theta back there, and you need theta to fall asleep, and you need delta to stay asleep."
I've got a question while we're in question mode, if you don't mind. If
Sure.
there are people, I've had a lot of questions, I guess, but I'm just wondering for the folks that are here, if anybody is interested in learning more about neurofeedback or getting training in neurofeedback, what's involved in that? How does one learn about it, and does it take a long time? Or is it all that?
It's the Wild West. So typically, there's no certification body per se in the professional setting. BCIA, I don't even remember what BCIA stands for, American Association, but they will only certify people who either have a master's in clinical counseling or a medical field. So if you're a hypnotherapist, you don't count. Or if you're a coach, you don't count. So it doesn't mean that you can't use it. It just means you can't be certified. Now, depending on what you do, one of the easiest ones is actually to sign up for MindLift and get the subscription with MindLift, which is this little gadget. If you have an iPhone or an Apple device, you can actually just download the app, and it has a section where you can go through and learn about how MindLift works. So there's a self-assessment session. It doesn't cost anything for the app. They will push you to connect with a therapist, with a neuro coach or someone, but you don't need to at this stage. The training typically for me was a lot of self-study courses through MindLift. They had like a lot of CAN modules online where I would go through. Then there was a number of cases where I had to present to a clinician and go through my thinking of why I was there. And then in my case, I did that for over 3 years. Right, every week I was actually doing rounds, doing cases over and over. So basic knowledge you can probably get in a couple of months. The beauty with some of these tools is that it's not that tough to do. Like if you can operate a remote control for your TV, you can do neurofeedback. Now, being good at it's a different discussion, and being able to tailor it and tweak it to very specific needs is a whole different level. But the basic functionality, if you stick to, for example, with MindLift, they'll come out with like a standard sleep protocol, which is fine. They'll come up with a calm protocol. They'll come up with how do you reduce anxiety protocol, and they're all great. They're good to use. Now, the beauty of using somebody who's, for example, like me, who with the experience and not necessarily certification. The certification just means you came out of that category and you passed the exam. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have a lot of experience. So if you're looking for a neurofeedback therapist, look at somebody that can actually tailor the experience to you. Do you want remote, or do you want to do in clinic? In clinic is typically more expensive and it's a little bit more difficult. Now it's fantastic. You'll get really solid readings, but they'll typically push 2 sessions or 3 sessions per week at maybe 45 minutes per session. Guess why? That works for the clinician. May not necessarily the best bet for the client, but they're not necessarily going to get a client to come in 7 days a week for 18 minutes. Just not likely to happen. Where the remote versions, depending what you're working on, if you get 18 minutes at home, you can do it. For example, a sleeping protocol is typically 20 minutes before you want to fall asleep. So it's not that tough.
Are there any other questions? Well, we'll stop down here for just a moment.
I have one question here too. Have you ever used the neurological procedures and the science on yourself? And if so, what's happened?
Yeah, um, I use all of the modalities of myself, including neurofeedback. Right now, I'm doing a very specific, tailored neurofeedback that I've designed for myself to increase my gamma waves. Gamma is sort of the Zen Buddhist monk level. It's kind of weird because if you think fast waves are going to be bad, well, gamma is like faster than the fast. But in gamma waves, it's really when you're more um, connected to the world in a much broader sense. So if you want to go into the world of woo woo, gamma waves is kind of where that's at. So for me, it gives me incredible intuition and focus and ability to see things in a much broader, more collective space. Um, I've used it for sleeping on occasion when I was going through some period of tough times, and it works quite well. Like in my case, 3 sessions and I was actually sleeping. That's not normal. Typically, our brains react a lot slower, so it might take 4 to 6 weeks before you're starting to see effect. But some people, it's literally 1 session, and others, it's like, no, it's going to take a lot longer. Every brain's a little bit different, but yeah. So
How
I'm
do you
sorry.
how do you know and when do you know?
How do I know what?
How many sessions, whether it's going to take more than one session or repeat sessions are necessary?
Well, repeat sessions will be necessary in neurofeedback. It's like the analogy is going to the gym. If you want to get a six pack of one visit to the gym, it's just not going to happen. So, if I make the analogy of the brain waves are muscles that you need to exercise, it's just going to take a lot of repetition. It's a lot of reps to get the brain waves to do what you want them to be doing.
I stuck it out, Barry. I went to the gym 3 times and it still didn't work.
But did you do it 3 in the same day or 3 over 2 years?
Over several years. Yeah, great. So, any more questions? Please go ahead. Go right ahead, you guys. Seize the day.
Dennis.
Sure. Dennis?
He was talking about the band, and did he call it Mind Lift?
Yep.
LFT?
Mind L-I-F-T, is that right, Barry?
MYNDLYFT.
Oh, okay. MYND.
Yeah.
Thank you.
LIFT.
Okay. And if we Google that, we should get some handle on what's available.
Yeah, you can Google neurofeedback. In general, there's 1,000 different versions out there.
Okay.
Mindlift has a lot of good short videos, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 20 minutes. Seaburn Fisher, not associated with her at all, but she uses a equipment that I don't use. It's more desktop and in clinic based, but she is a phenomenal teacher and educator. She's not a PhD, she's a master's, but she's actually doing a session in South Africa in October where it's combining neurofeedback and hypnotherapy, like how they both work well together.
Lovely.
Yep, Jacqueline.
Sorry, what was that name again?
Seaburn
Her
Fisher.
name?
It's her name, yes.
Seaburn Fisher, did you say?
Yep.
And it's got a C in it? F-I-S-H.
No, it'd be an S.
Good. Great. I noticed
Larry, we wanted to get in contact with you. Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, you can get through my email. Michael, if you wouldn't mind popping it in, barryd@bearbridge.com.
You can also Google him. It'll take you right to the website. Barry Downing. It'll get you right there. Yeah.
So Michael, I remember you were moving. I guess those are your new digs. So it doesn't look the same behind you.
Yeah, definitely. These are my new digs. But they'll be different by next week again too. I do have a lot of lovely choices when I'm using the green screen. But yeah, nice room, and a lovely room here too. You guys contributing so many good questions and so much information. This fascinating idea that reminds me of what's it? Betty Boop. by the way, it's so funny to think about these things because I'm remembering we're talking about cartoons from what, the 40s, right? Betty Boop. And she put on the alpha cap when
There you go.
she needed to move into thinking mode. And I'm like, oh my God, this is language that has been around and being developed for, for quite some while.
Yeah, a recommendation, if anyone's interested, find somebody that can actually do, if you had, for example, a mind lift headband locally, I can do an assessment virtually. That's not a problem. But find somebody that will do it. If you just want to have that experience for yourself, don't get yourself hooked into where you have to sign up for 3 months worth of, no, just do an assessment as a, what does that tell you when you're with your own brain? That's kind of cool. So you'll typically people will charge, it's all over the map. It might be I charge $500. Some people will charge 300. Some people will charge 1,000. So it really depends on, and it's a great, just look at your brain, what your brain's saying to you as you go through that. So Carol, in your case, I think it would be awesome for you if you've been through ADHD and other issues that just have a look at. I don't know if you probably MRIs or whatever else as well as part of your therapy.
I don't remember because I was in a coma whether I had an MRI. I have not had one since I've been awake. I asked for one because I've developed essential tremor, but the neurologist said, no, it's not bad enough yet for you to need an MRI. So,
well, if you can find somebody that does neurofeedback, you might want to just do an assessment and say, what do they tell you?
yeah, I'll be Googling that for Vancouver, Washington to see what we've got here.
Tons. Washington, you've got a lot of clinicians. It really comes down to do you want in clinic or remote? Remote, you can find them anywhere, but in clinic, you're going to have to find somebody local to you, obviously.
Right.
So Barry, I've got an interesting question about the difference between like the Muse headband and the Mind Lift headband. What would be the difference?
Mind Lift uses the Muse headband, so it's the same headband.
Okay.
What Mind Lift adds to it is this extra electrode and the software.
Can you just get the headband, or do you need to get the Mind Lift software with it?
It depends what you want to do. If you just use the Muse, you can do training. They'll quasi call it neurofeedback. It really isn't technically neurofeedback, but it can help with meditation and other things, which is the other cool thing about if you use MindLift, you have a tool that you can use for other things as well, which would be like mindfulness training, whatever else. Typically, you're going to need some sort of software that's going to take the signal that you're getting and spitting it out in some way that makes sense to you.
Okay.
If you're a techie, you can get just the Muse headband, and there's a pretty cheap program available, an app available called Mind Control, where you can record your own brainwaves. And right now, what's interesting is you can, if you did that, you recorded your own brainwaves and you actually uploaded it into ChatGPT. You can ask ChatGPT, hey, what's going on with my brainwaves? And right now, Cody Rawl, who's a U.S. Navy psychiatrist, he's tech for psych, and he's awesome. He's been he's been training ChatGPT extremely well right now with neurofeedback. So he's been doing exactly this with it, and he said, the protocols are actually getting really good, where the AI is saying not far off of what a experienced therapist would say.
All right. Well, I'm fascinated. And sadly, we are already at the 10 o'clock mark, which means, by the way, Barry, it is 11 o'clock where you are.
It is.
Oh, my goodness. We really appreciate you being here with us and sharing all that you did. And thanks for those of you who brought questions and stuff along as well. And now what we're going to do is what we do every time, Barry, and that is we invite everybody in the audience to open up their microphones so that in a great cacophony of, Karen wants to make an announcement.
Oh, we do that next month at this time. Krista Marie Bowen talking about not psychic journeys. What is it, Michael? Help me.
I'd have to look at my
Quantum journeys. I'm sorry, quantum journeys. I lost it for just a moment. I must have had a neurofeedback loop. Misfire someplace. Quantum journeys next time with Chris and Marie Bowman. Now, let's please thank Barry for such a great.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Barry, and we'll look forward to seeing you around. I hope you join us again here from time to time, and everybody come back next month. But thanks, Barry. Open your mics, everybody, and say goodnight.
Thank
Good
you very much.
night.
That's
Thank
right.
you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.